Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This is part 6 of my video series, Make a Journal with Me. And now I am working on choosing the different trims that I want to use. So I'm looking at a couple different like saris here. And I already kind of like laid down that polka dotted one as well. And I'm pulling a few more and just seeing what I think about the different colors. And I really like that polka dotted one, so I go ahead and I just put that on there. And it ties in with the cover, where I added it on the over some of the like cream colored like pinwheel shapes. So I have that like washi on my sewing machine, and I kind of just like, you know, keep my paper kind of like close to that, and then that kind of helps me keep an even line. If it doesn't, if it's not even or it gets off a little bit, that doesn't really, bother me. It just adds to the character when things are a little bit wonky. So I'm just trimming here, and I usually always like kind of trim my sari like at an angle. And I usually do the opposite on each end. And I didn't quite go all the way to the bottom. I had ran out of like the sari, but I really liked it. You can always like stitch another like row of a sari trim on there. It doesn't even have to be the same, color combo. But you can. But I didn't. I liked it the way that it was. So I'm just kind of looking at the colors of the cover and just like, contemplating these different saris and if I want to use them. And if I did, where I would put them just based on the colors. And I flip the pages because I like to see like what they look like, because they do stick out a bit. So I want to make sure that they look nice, as you turn the pages. So I'm going to pull some other sari here, different colors. And I just keep kind of like looking and trying to decide, and then I ultimately decide this one. And when I stitch it through, I just kind of just like, just bunch up the sari underneath. I mean, you can pleat it. You can, I mean, whatever you want to do, you can do that. But I just bunch it up and just put it underneath, and I like the look of that, and that's fine for me. And I do like a little bit of back stitching just at the beginning and the end. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit, enough to make sure that the threads are secure. I always think that the more like wonky and imperfect it is, the better it looks. So I'm just inking up that thread a little bit so it's not so stark white. Even though it's an off white, it just really stands out sometimes. So I'm taking a look at it all again and just deciding where I think something should be. And I really feel like something should be at the end there, but I'm just really trying to decide which page, which ones I want to use. So I spend a little bit of time there doing that. And it gets a little darker here on the video because it's really dark and gloomy outside. And I tried to fix the filter on that, but it will brighten up again. So I keep kind of comparing and going back and forth, but I ultimately don't like that blue when, you flip the page that has the green on it for it to stick out. So I keep like pulling different ones like pinks, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I kind of like that. And It's just a back and forth thing. So I decided a little tab here would look nice. So I'm just taking some of this trim, deciding where I want it to be, and then I'll pass it through the sewing machine with a zigzag stitch. I'm straightening out the threads a little bit. And then I think that looks really cute. I just cut off like the little bit of the excess. And then it needed a little glue because I didn't quite get the stitching to the top of it. And it's a little floppy. So I think I'm trying to decide where I want another like tab to go. Yep, I am. And I feel like it should kind of go there. So I quickly pick, the lace that I want to use. And then I just kind of like stitch a little bit of a bunch there. And then I don't end up liking like how it's kind of puffy on the one end after I go to put the journal card there. So you'll see me trim it, and that's why, is because I didn't like how puffy it was. And I'm like, where did that page go? I'd gotten like all sidetracked. I'm like, is this where it went? And then I'm like, oh yeah, this is where it went. So see, I'm kind of like, I don't really like how puffy that is. So I just kind of cut that. And I mean, you can't really tell, like watching it, but like when it's in your hands and it's in person, and you can see it and feel it and stuff, there's things that, they just don't look as good, or they just, they're, you know, too fluffy or whatever, and so, it's just little things like that. So now I'm adding a bit of a trim piece here. But I want that pocket to still be functional and not have, a lot of like lace or trim or anything in the way. So I'm just kind of like pulling from my basket like different things. So I'm just like, because I try to use up my trim bits first. It doesn't always work that way, but I do try to use them up. So I'm just pulling some different things that I like or that I think might work. And I'll ultimately settle on this piece. So I'm going to go to sew this, but it's a little bit bulky, so I'll end up tacking it down with a little bit of glue um, because the ruffles kind of want to get caught in the feet there. So I just tack it in place and then I'll be able to stitch it. And really, you should let glue dry before you sew, but I'm a bit impatient. But I just love how this whole journal is turning out. I think that's like my favorite page right there with the button card behind with the floral pocket. I really, really love it. So again, I'm just inking up the threads a bit, and then I thought, I'll just ink a little bit around. I just really just go on feel, what I think looks good and stuff. And I'm constantly pulling out sorry strings. I mean, those fray, for a bit and for quite a bit. And, um, you know, you just pull them out or leave them. You could leave them They just, adhere to a lot of things. So I'm trying to decide what else I want to do, if I want to do tabs or if I want to do another sari trim. Um, so I'm just kind of trying out more things. And I ultimately don't pick this. And I actually was going to leave this page blank because I was going to add like a tag or something to it, which I still may do. But I go a completely different route here. As I was like putting things on, I was kind of like, I mean, sometimes that's how it goes. When you lay something down, you're like, this is it. But this piece was a little bit too small because I kind of wanted it to hang over the side edge there. So you'll see that I get the rest of the material out. It's from an old shirt that I got at the thrift store. I actually don't know how old it is, but I do like this lace. It's got a stretch in it, so it's perfect for like a belly band. So I'm just cutting off the arm, and then I am going to make a little bit of a larger piece for this page. So I just use that other piece as a template to kind of gauge how much I need. And I feel like it's a little too long, so I think I cut it a little bit. And I had contemplated like leaving where the seam was like on there, but then I just didn't like the way that the piece, I thought it looked better when I flipped it. So I'll eventually have to cut that, I'll have to trim that off because it'll add too much bulk into the spine there. And then the pages won't lay very well. So I'm just doing a stitch on each side. I stretch the fabric just slightly, not a whole lot, because you don't want your page to make a like kind of like a bow. Um, you want it to lie flat, but I don't want the fabric to sag. So it's just a slight little pull there. And I'm taking a look at it all in there again. So now I think I'm ready to like bind the journal. So what I do is anything that's removable, I completely take it out. Um, you'll see I tidy up here and there, but I'm taking anything out that shouldn't be in there. And I'm also sort of like situating the papers like how I like them. So I'm getting out my binder clips, but I'll end up having to get larger ones because those just, I could not get the mouths on them open wide enough to clamp the paper like how I needed it to clamp it. So I'm just kind of taking a look through it all and arranging my papers. Because you have to think about like where the holes go, how the papers are going to lay. So I spend a little bit of time, getting these the way that I want them. And then I already have a template from like the last journal I made. So you'll see the template, and I always measure. I don't ever guess that part. That's just how I do it. But I always, you know, have a template for myself when I'm doing something like this. If you have a hidden spine, or maybe you're doing like an open spine type journal or something like that, I feel like that's not as necessary to have a template. You can kind of guess, but for a spine that's going to show that you're going to see on the outside, I want those measurements like almost perfect. So I do use a template every single time. So here I'm just trying to get my papers, all situated, making sure everything is correct. Because this is something I do not want to mess up. And I think that's probably why this can sometimes be a little bit stressful, is because, the rest of the journal, you can kind of fix things and, make it work, and, messy is better and all that kind of stuff. But like with the spine, I just feel like, I mean, it's important. I mean, that's what's holding everything together. So It is a little bit stressful, and I spend a lot of time here because I want to make sure it's right. Because to have to redo something like this isn't, worth it to me. So I take extra time here, and I make sure that I'm gonna get it correct. So I keep adjusting on the edges to basically get those papers down inside that into the spine there, as close as possible. And so now I start all my holes, and I really push my all the way through. It just kind of makes a little bit of a larger hole for when I'm going to use my needle to go through it. So there's 5 holes there. And then I take about 3 times the length of the journal for the wax thread, which I think is actually called like wax cord. Um, you can use, whatever you want though. A lot of people use like embroidery floss to do this. But I really, because the journal is like a cream color, and I just want to use the wax cord for it. Since it's not my journal, I just feel like this is really sturdy, really good. And there's a lot of tutorials probably out there. I actually, when I first learned this stitch, I just use a diagram. And, basically you go in through the middle, you'll go through the second hole, then through the first, back through the second, skip over the third, go to the fourth, into the fifth, back through the fourth, and then into the middle. But diagrams are real easy, but I'm sure there's, probably some videos out there too that show the technique. Or you can slow up my video, maybe. And sometimes I have to put the awl back through because, the papers shift a little bit. Um, and I just don't want to blindly, stab the needle through. So I'll use the awl to kind of like find the hole again. And then what I do is before I tighten everything, I just take the clips off and I take a look at everything. I want to make sure that all my pages are good, because there's no sense in tightening it if I need to fix something, if something's not, working right. So I just take a good, flip through of all the pages just to make sure everything looks really, really good. And when I'm happy with that, then I start tightening the strings. And I make sure they're snug. I mean, they don't need to be like super, super, tight or anything. But I don't want when I pull on them on the outside, I don't want there to be any slack basically. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to pull and adjust a little bit more. And then now I'm really happy with it. So I take the needle off and I go ahead and I tie 2 knots. And then I always leave my string long. Occasionally I'll put some sort of charm or something, but I like the end user to have that option to kind of personalize it, because they may have some special like beads or buttons or jewelry or whatever, and they want to do that. And then I just kind of go back through the journal and just kind of do anything that I think needs done. And I decide that I'm going to address this now. This edge here. It's just a little bit too stark and too yellow and too much of a straight edge, and I feel like it needs to be softened up a little bit. So I just put a little bit of glue on the back of this trim, and I'll just glue it in place. And I really feel like that just like it just really made that strip. I think it looked really good. So I just kind of take a look back through and that sort of thing.